My name is Tracy Heilers. I'm founder and executive director of Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. We're a nonprofit organization, educators mentoring other educators. Our mission revolves around collaboration. And so one of the first things we did about a year after we launched is collaborated on a book with over 40 school educators from the US, as well as over 20 resource organizations. So we like to connect educators and school communities with lots of different resources, trainings. And we all know that mindfulness is getting more popular, so we want to really help everybody with best practices in their schools. And so Richard Brady actually was a contributor for our book. He actually, from afar, he's held a fond place in my heart, because as I was raising my 3 kids and leading yoga and mindfulness in their schools and kind of just getting started, I found Mindfulness and Education Network. And so kind of watched the conversations from afar for many years. And then as my kids got older, I wanted to help the mindfulness and education community. And you just kind of try to figure out where your niche is within it. And I thought, using my talents of event planning and love web design, and social media is not my favorite, but I will go there for a good cause. And so I launched the coalition and immediately brought on lots of educators to help us with it. And so I was super excited when he contributed a chapter for our book. And he mentioned then at the same time he was writing a book. So now, where do I get it? Underneath here. I was super excited to hear it's the baby was born in June. So I just kind of want to jump right to getting to know Richard a little bit more and have him share about his book, and then I'll share my thoughts on it. I just finished the last 2 chapters a few hours ago, so everything's nice and fresh. It was a wonderful finish to the book. But maybe, Richard, could you start us out with just a really short centering practice, just to transition us into our time together, and then introduce yourself, and then
Sure.
you can lead a longer one. So this can be like the minute
Okay.
transition version.
Okay, so why don't we all close our eyes and bring to mind someone who was a very special teacher for us. It could be actually a school teacher, a formal teacher. It could be a parent or another relative. It could be a child, grandchild. It could be an animal from whom we learned a lot. But just invite this special teacher, alive or dead, doesn't matter. Just invite them to come and take up residence in your heart for a couple of minutes and just share their energy with you as they have done before. And I'll just invite this bell to formally start and again to formally end. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I'd love us just to start with, your book is called Walking the Teacher's Path with Mindfulness. So just share a little bit about what you taught for your career, and just to kind of lay the framework for what the book is about.
Well, I began my career as a teacher at Woodrow Wilson High School in Washington, D.C., a public school. And I'd had no teacher training whatsoever. But I was 26 and no longer eligible to go to Vietnam. So I decided it was time for me to leave school and do something more useful. And so I began teaching mathematics there in 1970. And one of my students, starting in 1971, is with us tonight, Carl. He's a number theorist. He and his partner, Alice, are number theorists who are professors at UC Irvine. And actually, Charles retired now. There's a story about him in the book. And after 3 years at Wilson, I moved down the street to Sidwell Friends School, a Quaker school. I was looking for more opportunities for professional development than I had at Wilson, and also just more time to breathe because I had classes that were as large as 45 students, and that was not the case at this independent school. And I stayed there for 34 years. And during that time, I became very involved with mindfulness and had started to teach mindfulness, and felt pretty strongly that that was what I was supposed to be doing, and that I really couldn't continue doing if I was showing up to teach math every day. So I retired a little bit early, and I've been teaching mindfulness in person or by writing a book about my adventures most recently since then. So that's my life in a nutshell.
Wonderful. And before I ask my next question, I want to go into kind of how our evening will work, because I forgot to do that at the beginning. I'll chat with Richard a little bit more here about his book so you can get a feel for it. And then he's going to lead us in a practice and a little mini mentorship session or lesson. And then we'll have time for there'll be like reflection and connection for all of us at the end, and time for questions as well. But if you could grab a pen and paper so that you're ready for those reflection activities, go ahead and do that. But next, I just wanted to kind of share my love and what I personally thought of this book. I loved that it had a similar mission as our Educating Mindfully book, in that we wanted something, and Richard wanted this as well for his book, something that could be used by faculty at schools for professional development, professional learning. So when there's a community who's learning about mindfulness together, or wanting to support each other in adult social emotional learning throughout a year, like this is a perfect book to be able to do that, because I believe ours is to the Educating Mindfully one, just because it's not going to be overwhelming for the staff. And this is deceiving that it's so thin, but it's a bunch of chapters. They're all maybe around 5 or 6 pages long, and I love that you have the reflection questions at the end of them. Yeah. And I really love it. So, and within this, it's like a format for your memoir as well. It's not complete. I mean, it's not completely in the time frame. I love how just having put together a book myself, I like really appreciated the thought of how the chapters led. And then to, like an hour or two ago when I did the last few chapters, it just, there's a climax and you really, you go deep. I mean, you go deep in several of them, but it culminates really nicely. So
Hmm.
maybe explain a little bit about that format and how you,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really appreciated that it's a mentorship book. We don't all, not everybody knows Richard Brady, and I can be like, this is a person whose life like you can learn from him through this book, even if like you'll have never met him. So thank you.
Oh, this is a great question and kind of a surprising answer. This book began a long time ago, about maybe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, with my writing a memoir. And it was a much longer memoir, and it had things about my spiritual path, about my family life, growing up, you name it, it was all there. And I have kind of a special relationship with one publisher, Parallax Press, because uh, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master who was nominated for the Peace Prize by Martin Luther King, is the person who really started Parallax Press. And I was a student, I continue to be a student of his. And so they took a look at the book, and I had a very wonderful conversation with their publisher, their soon-to-be publisher, and he said, "Who did you write? Why did you write this book?" And I said immediately, I wrote this memoir because a lot of things have happened in my life, and I've learned a great deal, and I think others would benefit from some of the things that I've learned, and I wanted to pass it on because I have limited contact with limited opportunities to do it in person. So he said, and who did you most want to pass it on to? That was obvious. I wanted to pass it on to other teachers. So he said, that's great. That's a great goal to have. But you and I both know that teachers are far too busy to read a 300-page book about your family life and your growing up and things like that in order to find the particular things that you have to say to them as teachers. So what I can say to you is if you wanted to write a book specifically for teachers, we would be interested in looking at it. But we don't think that a memoir is something that people are going to be interested in until you become the president or something like that. So that's how the book was born. And I had a great deal of the book already there in the memoir. I just had to pull it out. But then I had to organize it, as you were saying, Tracy. That was a big job to try to figure out how can this be useful. So I divided it up into 4 different areas. The first area is fire. Oh, let me get
I
the
have it
exact
right here.
title.
Catching Fire.
Catching Fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So Catching Fire is about motivation. And it's about getting students motivated, because if they're not motivated, not much is going to happen in the classroom. So they're all stories about me being motivated as a student in high school, starting in high school, and about ways in which I attempted and often was successful in motivating my own students, both in terms of mathematics and also in terms of mindfulness, which I did teach at my school. The next chapter is life without boundaries, and that chapter is about agency. And I think all of us as teachers are trying to promote agency in our students. And of course, it's nice to have agency in our own lives to begin with. We're modeling it. Often, what I hear from teachers suggests to me that many teachers do not have agency and that they're suffering for the lack of it, particularly during COVID. And then the third chapter was listening with the heart, and that was really about communicating deeply with others, and with seeing deeply, listening deeply, speaking from the heart, basically connecting with life, connecting with our own life, connecting with the life around us, both the human life and also, for example, a painting that there's a story about spending time 20 minutes a week looking at a piece of modern art for a college professor who was the professor in this course, and was quite controversial, and also made an incredible impact on her students with that assignment. And then the last chapter was walking the path, and once we kind of get clear about, or begin to get clear about what we're doing as teachers and what's important, then we still have the rest of our life as a teacher to live. And that life is not uneventful. And so various kinds of things happen. And our responses to them are informed by the things that have preceded. So you see in this last part things happening that have echoes from the earlier things that you've read. So the book is intended to be read pretty much in order, although it doesn't have to be. And then, as Tracy said, at the end of each section within the chapter, or within the part, it's called, there are questions to reflect and contemplate. And those are there for two reasons. The first reason is so that the reader stops, because this is not a book to just read through. It's a book to take in and connect with and see what's there for you. Because it's about me, you could be fooled into thinking that it's not about you. And these questions for reflection and contemplation are all of the nature to ask you to reflect on when these things have been true in your own life and what happened. So that's really the professional development part of it, that it's seeing how this is relevant, has been relevant, maybe will be relevant to you in your life as an educator and as a human being.
Yeah. I want to give just one example, and then we can move into leading a practice in a little mentorship lesson. But the last chapter, many of the chapters you share the learning that happened for you during a lot of your summers, whether that be in Plum Village or with the last chapter you talk about the retreat the 8-day retreat you would lead in Italy for educators, and you shared how you ended that with a like they reviewed the last 8 days, and then they kind of chose one of the moments to just sit with and reflect on even longer, and then they shared that. But then the reflection at the end was to watch the newsreel of yourself reading this book, and then pick out that something that stands out and share with another person. So I thought I could do that tonight and share my one little thing that many things stood out, but one that I loved was in the chapter, it's called Deep Community. And then you shared a prize lesson about collaboration from Thich Nhat Hanh in one of the times you went there, and it was during a walking meditation. And he says, you may notice someone walking very beautifully. If so, there's no need to be jealous. That person's practice is supporting your own. Similarly, your walking practice supports the practices of others around you. And then he gave each of you a sticker to put on your shoe that says, I walk for you. And you really felt yourself one with your fellow retreatants after that as you were practicing. And then you brought that and integrated that into, sort of earlier in the chapter, you were talking about how you do a lot of small group learning with your math classes, but there always is that situation coming up where someone hasn't done their homework, and how do you handle that? And you talked to several people, and you share kind of your journey of kind of finding a solution to that. And then so you said, before school began, I ordered 1,000 stickers reading, I learn for you. And maybe you can share then how that affected that small group learning and kind of helped introduce that.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that one. So the first day of class, most of these students would not have had me as a teacher before, although they may have heard something about my unorthodox teaching methods. I don't think small groups were being used in any of the other math classes. And so I needed to explain to them that we would be doing things differently, and that they would not just be responsible for themselves, but they had a responsibility to the group. So I gave each student a sticker, I learned for you, and said, please put it on the front of your textbook. And take your book home, and let that be a reminder that when you're doing your assignment, that you're not just doing it for yourself. But I also gave them the exercise the first day of eating a raisin in 5 minutes. And at the end of that introductory class, I said, when you eat a raisin like that, slowly like that, you're getting the full nutritional value out of it. That's how I want you to do your homework. I don't want you to rush through your homework. I want you to really be with it and get everything you can, all the nutritional value. It's not fast food. It's home-cooked, good food. I was lucky I taught math, because I could then say to them, if you don't finish all the problems, that's not so bad. It's much better to not finish, to skip a few, and use your time in a mindful way. Now, if I'd been teaching a foreign language, I don't think I could have told them to skip some of the vocabulary. So I don't know how that particular lesson translates. In fact, that's one of the wonderful things about teaching mindfulness, is that you get to be creative and figure out how to bring it into your classroom in whatever subject you're teaching. And so that's one of the things this book hopefully encourages. From the example I said, there's not a lot of mathematics per se in the book. It could. So I don't. Were you a math teacher, Tracy?
No, I was an engineer, and then I started taking classes to become a math teacher when my husband's a teacher. So, but
Okay.
yeah, then we started a family. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I definitely your path of you started in definitely that science realm before
Yeah.
teacher that connected with me.
Yeah. Okay, but I picked out something special for this practice, and it's brand new. It's not a simple practice. It's a series of questions some of which are to reflect on and also to write a little bit about. And I'll talk about it after we do it. And I'm going to share it on the screen. But maybe it would be better to not look, to just listen to it. If you forget what the question is, then by all means take a look. Okay, so with a pen and paper nearby, close your eyes and sit quietly and breathe. If you prefer, leave your eyes slightly open, letting in a bit of light, if that's more comfortable. This exercise is about freedom, and specifically freedom at work. However, if you are retired, or if there is another community which is more compelling for you to choose, and as we do this exercise, you do not need to think of apply it to your work situation or what it was. But now we're going to continue with our eyes closed. Just contemplate a time in your life when you experienced freedom, anywhere, any place. And once you have narrowed your vision to that place and time, return to it for a minute or two and just experience the freedom that you did originally. This experience that you're with was the result of numerous causes and conditions. With your eyes still closed, turn your awareness to what these may have been. Some of these conditions may have been external to you. For example, the environment you were in, other people who were present, the activity you were engaged in. Some of them may have been internal. Your aim, memories from prior experiences, your mood at the time. But just be aware, bring your awareness to what those conditions were that made them important in your feelings of freedom. Okay, now open your eyes and with your pen and paper, make two lists. The first list is the list of external factors that went into your feeling of freedom, and the second list is internal factors that went into your feelings of freedom. And you can just keep adding to the list as things occur to you. Okay, so let's now look at our two lists and think about our work or our family or whatever the setting is that you would like to focus your attention on. And cross off those causes or conditions on both lists that are not present in your work or in your family or wherever else you are wanting to focus on. Anything that is not present. Okay, now let's close our eyes again. And now let's contemplate experiences of freedom at work. Or in the family, or wherever else you've been thinking about. Any times whatsoever where you experience freedom. And pay particular attention to the causes and conditions at work when you're in your setting that are detrimental to your freedom. When you're ready, open your eyes and make two more lists of detrimental ones that are external, outside of you, factors that are detrimental to your freedom at work, and another one of factors that are internal in your mind that are detrimental to your freedom at work. If the causes and conditions at work or at your setting are not sufficient for you to ever or only occasionally experience freedom, what might you do to change the external causes and conditions? For example, spending more time with certain people, avoiding others, and the internal condition. For example, stop regularly and smile to yourself or to others. Develop more compassion for yourself or others. accept reality. So here are 2 more lists to make for your own benefit. Can be just shorthand. And of course, these lists can be added to. And these lists would apply even if you are experiencing a lot of freedom, because there may be possibilities for you to experience even more. Okay, let's close our eyes again and return briefly to that very first experience of freedom that you began with. And when you hear the bell, and come back together. Thank you for participating in this exercise. It's still very rough, and if you happen to look at the list that was up, it went from 5 to 7, so I haven't figured out what number 6 is, or whether there was a 6 and it got disappeared or what. So it's still it's still very much in progress. It comes from the origin of this exercise is a program that I attended that was sponsored by the Network of Mindful Business, which is an organization that a friend of mine started in Germany for businesses in Germany to promote mindfulness. And it inspired me to create this exercise because I was aware that a lot of us teachers had a very hard year last year and are looking forward to perhaps another hard year again. And we do not experience much freedom. Even if we did before COVID, somehow the rules have changed. And what I saw was that a teacher, and this was borne out from talking to friends who are teaching in schools where there is mindfulness. With mindfulness, when teachers who had mindfulness practices did much better during COVID than ones who did not have it, because they had a way to practice with all of the problems that, yes, they were still there, but accepting reality is one of the great gifts of mindfulness. It doesn't mean that you don't work for change, but it means that you are not fighting against it, and you're not moaning about it all the time and using up your energy and complaining, rather than in being able to look at where you could be helpful in making things better in your school or in the world. So this is the kind of thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about, how to use my experience with mindfulness to present mindfulness. And I'm working with teachers now. I'm not working with students anymore. But to speak to teachers in writing in um, and in teaching and in leading retreats. And actually, I will be co-leading a retreat in August, and it will be on my website. Um, it's a 5-day retreat for teachers, and it's online. So it happens to be out of Massachusetts. But if you're interested in finding out about it, just go to mindingourlives.net, mindingourlives.net, and you'll find a link to that retreat in the events page. You'll also find a page called Walking, which is about this book that I've just finished writing, and it has a discount code to buy it for 20% off from the publisher. And you'll also find my newsletter, and my latest newsletter is devoted to this free at work exercise. So you'll find this exercise there, and you can copy it off and you can adapt it for your own needs. But I do believe that you can get some interest in mindfulness these days that you would not have been able to get a couple of years ago, simply because the world is different and it requires different skills. So it's a question about the times of the retreat. So I'm afraid that it's all day. I mean, there are periods of rest and so forth where you're not online, but it's going to be going from the morning through the late afternoon, and the times were chosen so that they would work on East Coast time and also Pacific time, but they don't work well for teachers who are already back in school, and I'm sorry about that. I don't know whether it's going to be available online afterward, whether it's going to be recorded and available. I guess this is the first time I've done a retreat in this setting. So, I hope so. Okay, maybe we have some time for a few other questions.
Yeah, let's just open it up here, and then we can do a little. We love with all of our sessions to get to know each other, so they're very laid back. So if you have a question for Richard, and then we can kind of all chime in on it's something that we want to learn other people's perspectives. Has anybody read the book yet?
That's the problem.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if maybe you had a few friends. You said you knew a few people, so. Sure.
Yeah, I did, but but they haven't read it either.
I know, it is very brand new. I feel
Yeah.
I've started.
You have one.
I've started, but I'm just working my way through. What's happening with the rest of your memoir?
Well, the rest of the memoir, there is a part about my spiritual path, and that is pretty close to being complete, but I don't know that the market for that is the same as, I mean, I don't see the need for, that's present in the educational community as being, I think that's unparalleled, I should say. And there are a lot of people writing memoirs with about their lives, and with wonderful things to say and wonderful things you can learn. But there are not very many teachers who are writing for this kind of book. They're telling people things to do, and this is a book asking people to look at their own lives and find answers for themselves from their own lives, and using my story simply as a jumping off place. So I think that's the book that I would like to be known for, if I'm known for anything. Thank you, Carl.
I
Yeah.
don't know, Richard. I would buy that book, the whole memoir. Go ahead.
Yeah, or I'm wondering if, there's an online, like it could be something that you offer on your website, like just a PDF that it doesn't even, people who buy the book and want to learn, that it could be something they could purchase just PDF version. An online book, I don't know, because I love going deep in it's not necessarily an educator thing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but someone who reads this and wants to go down that spiritual path with you, I think there might be some takers on that, including.
Well, yeah, if somebody, there is a way to contact me if for people who want to get more information. I would refer to people to other teachers, and I mean, it's a book about practice. To go deeper is not about actually reading more. It's about practicing mindfulness in perhaps in new ways, but in deeper ways. And I think that that's the answer to how we can really make more and more of an impact in our schools, in our classrooms, is to be a model for sanity, for calm, for inclusiveness, and for acceptance, care, and for caring, compassion. I mean, all these are qualities that are nurtured by a mindfulness practice as we get into it, and that's one of the reasons why I have found it so important in my own life to not only for me to practice it, but also for me to encourage others to practice it. And we're not all in a situation where we can share mindfulness in a direct way of like teaching practices to our students. In some schools that are part of the coalition, maybe that's generally the case, which is great. But mindfulness is so much more than those practices. The whole is much greater than the parts, or even the sum of the parts. And so it's a way really of being that I see us nurturing. And one of those ways is to teach practices. There's a teacher, Bijit Bose in Oakland, who teaches in the yoga in the inner city schools in Oakland, and he teaches something called he calls it dynamic mindfulness. And the way he goes about working with these young, disempowered youth to build up their sense of agency, a sense of purpose, and a sense of being a citizen of this world who can make a difference through daily, a period of time daily, where they work on yoga practices that are, where those practices focus on different kind of aspects of their character. And I was really inspired. He was a speaker at one of our MIEN conferences, and very, very moved. There's other people doing great work with mindfulness in schools for sure, and some really underserved schools in the Chicago area. I think there's a couple of organizations that are doing work, good work with many students. So my book may not seem on the face of it as being that relevant to in those schools and to those student populations, because I was kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. But what I'm wanting to suggest is that the real impact we have is about how we practice and what we do with our practice to turn it into something that that our students will understand and want to make their own in their own way. And that's what I did. That's how I became a teacher. I didn't have anybody telling me how to teach. I hadn't taken any education courses. I had to figure it out. And I had some good models. There are stories about people who were influential in my life. And one of them was a person who taught methods and principles of secondary education, which I took in the summer after my first year of teaching. And that course opened me up to teaching in a way that I had never had as a student. But we all have opportunities, and it's a question of whether we take the time to pay attention to them and see what they're calling us to do and inviting us to do, and finding other people who think alike. I mean, at my school, there was a group of us faculty members who used to meet over lunch once a week. And after we finished eating, we would just turn the light out in the small room, and we would just sit and meditate and support each other. And then another situation in my school was a teacher who was very much overworked, or at least felt she was. And the circumstances were such that she and I had a kind of a spur of the moment talk about the conditions at the school, which I did not experience the way that she did, but I knew how she did, how she was feeling overworked. And I said, I have an idea. And this is right at the beginning of the school year. I said, how about making an agreement between us that for this coming school year, every time we see each other, no matter where we're going, no matter what we're doing, we will stop and smile and breathe in and out 3 times before continuing. And so for 1 year, we had that agreement, and we honored it completely. Sometimes we wouldn't see each other during the day. She was a biology teacher. I was a math teacher. Sometimes we would see each other several times, but we always stopped and smiled and breathed and just relaxed. And at the end of the year, she came up to me and she said, that has made such a difference in my year. My year is totally different. How did you get that idea to do that? So I said, well, I have to admit that I practice mindfulness in a tradition where a bell of mindfulness is used. And whenever we hear the bell sound, whatever we're doing, we stop and breathe 3 times. And usually we find a smile because it's so refreshing to just stop and breathe. And then we go back to work. And so it occurred to me that I could be your bell of mindfulness and you could be mine. And so we were. The next year I actually recommended that practice to our entire K-12 faculty, pre-K-12 faculty, in an opening meeting of the entire staff. And no one did it. Nobody else found a friend and did that. And I think the reason was pretty clear in retrospect. There was nobody else who was practicing. And it's one thing to, if you're not a practitioner, to team up with somebody who has a practice and who has something that they really know that they can offer you and are offering it. There's a different energy there than just having 2 people who haven't done something by way of practice to all of a sudden start doing it. They need, you need support for this. And so if you do this free at work exercise, if you have an opportunity to do that, you'll want to be able to back it up with some support, some follow-up for the people who seriously find some things that they want to change in their lives because they would like their internal environment to support freedom. And they understand from this exercise that that might be possible, that the limits to their freedom are as much or more internal limits than as external limits, so that there's something that they can do even in the current, in whatever the situation they find themselves. But they'll need help. So hopefully help will be forthcoming. You can bring people into your school who know more. I've done a little bit of that, but the best thing is when people within the schools are working together in a cohort to kind of lift themselves up. And that may involve going off and doing trainings, doing retreats, things like that, on the part of some or all. But seeing it in your own school building, seeing its effect, is one of the most powerful. It's got to be the most powerful inducement to try it, because you see the difference it makes for the teachers themselves. You see the difference it makes in their classes for the students. And I would say my last 2 years of teaching, I started every math class with 5 minutes of contemplative practice. This is all, you'll find all this in the book. There was journaling, there was stretching, and there was meditation before every test and quiz. There was one student who said, sometimes I think I'm in an English class, not a math class, because she was doing journaling so much. But there were never any complaints. The students who were high school students really got that it was healthy. It was for their benefit. And they got, I think they got much more benefit from that than from the math. But they did finish and do just as well on the math, even though they had 5 minutes less each class period to specifically work on math. But doing a contemplative practice to begin class set a tone for their time in class, which I would say was the greatest. People would say, well, how did you use mindfulness with teaching math? Well, in fact, math is very analytic. It's almost the opposite in some ways. You're going for an answer, and students are looking for answers. So, but mindfulness helps them to slow down and really look at what they're doing and think about it. So it's a different frame of mind than one that is kind of in pursuit of an end product, because the end product is every moment is the end of the previous moment. And if you are continually practicing being in the present moment, then you are always arriving at the end in a way that's as beautiful as you could possibly hope for. So that might be a good place to stop, Tracy. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, right. We want to honor everybody's time. So if you have to hop off, definitely do. But we do want to, we always want to get some connection with those who are able to make it. And I'm wondering if we would like to share a little bit from our journaling. Maybe it's something that, a nugget that came to you about something that you use or start doing to create more freedom, or really anything, from any insights maybe they came to you in that. Would anybody like to share? And I'm just going to click off our recording.